thanks to relief that I planned last year, today's court decision snatches it away from him. I get it. I get it. I hear this. And I'm concerned about it. But today's decision has closed one path. It's going to be good for you. Thank you very, very much for listening. We're going to get this done, God willing. Thank you.
Mr. President, why did you give millions of borrowers false hope? You've doubted your own authority here in the past.
I didn't give any false hope. The question was whether or not I would do even more than was requested. What I did, I thought was appropriate and was able to be done and would get done. I didn't give borrowers false hope, but the Republicans snatched away the hope that they were given, and it's real hope. Thank you.
Mr. President, will you cancel student debt?
Your authority. Did you overstep your authority?
I think the court misinterpreted the Constitution.
Mr. President, do you admit failure in Afghanistan? Mistakes? There was a report on Afghanistan withdrawal saying there was failure, mistakes. Do you admit there was mistakes during the withdrawal and before?
No, all the evidence is coming back together. Remember what I said about Afghanistan? I said Al-Qaeda would not be there. I said it wouldn't be there. I said we'd get help from the Taliban. What's happening now? What's going on? Read your press. I was right. Thanks.
So the report is from the State Department, actually, about the withdrawal.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to First Reaction TV. My name is J Mark. Happy 4th of July weekend, everybody out there. I hope you guys have a good time. That was the most inept and one of the most incapable people alive right now, our president, Joe Biden. So, like most other creators out there, I was going to do a couple videos and a couple reviews of the big Supreme Court decisions that just came down this past week. There are some very important and controversial decisions that happened. As Joe Biden's given his speech on student loan relief, he's walking off and a reporter asked him about the Afghan withdrawal, which seemed kind of odd. Then to come to find out, this happened.
This just in, and it's notable. The State Department has released a report on its investigation into the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The findings are damning.
So after some of the biggest Supreme Court decisions that you'll ever hear of, and 4th of July weekend, and it being a Friday, the State Department just finally releases its examination of the Afghan withdrawal, where we had 13 service members die. How convenient is that? So with this being 4th of July weekend, I thought this was more important than the Supreme Court decisions. Those service members deserve some respect. They deserve to be acknowledged, and they deserve to just not be forgotten. They also deserve someone to take accountability for the mistakes that were made during the withdrawal. So we're going to find out if this administration finally took responsibility or how the State Department labeled all of this. But I really do hope all you guys at home do have a happy and a safe 4th of July. Please hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate all you guys watching.
Secretary Blinken, thanks so much for joining us. Take a listen to what President Biden was saying less than 6 weeks ago.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy. The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
Secretary Blinken, as you know, the Taliban has closed in on Kabul. We're evacuating the embassy, burning documents. Biden increased troops deploying to the country twice in 3 days just to rescue those there. This is not just about the overall idea of leaving Afghanistan. This is about leaving hastily and ineptly. Secretary Blinken, how did President Biden get this so wrong?
Jake, first, let's put this in context. And as we've discussed before, we were in Afghanistan for one overriding purpose, to deal with the folks who attacked us on 9/11. That's why we went there 20 years ago. And on the terms that we went into Afghanistan in the first place, we've succeeded in achieving our objectives.
The issue here is not just the withdrawal of U.S. forces, it's how they were withdrawn. The rapidity, the hastiness. President Obama's former ambassador to Afghanistan, Ryan Crocker, he called the way this was done, quote, a handover to the Taliban, and, quote, we have hung them out to dry about the Afghan people. Crocker continued, quote, I'm left with some grave questions in my mind about Biden's ability to lead our nation as commander-in-chief. To have read this so wrong, or even worse, to have understood what was likely to happen and not care, unquote. Does President Biden not bear the blame for this disastrous exit from Afghanistan?
Jake, we've seen two things. First, we've known all along, we've said all along, including the president, that the Taliban was at its greatest position of strength at any time since 2001, when it was last in charge of the country.
But beyond that is, again, the question of how poorly this was done. The idea that President Biden ordered 2,500 service members out and now is sending up to 5,000 service members back in, does that not on its face show that the exit was ineptly planned? And again, look, you told me a few months ago on this program that you thought it was entirely likely that the Taliban would be taking over the country. But President Biden, just last month, quote, "The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely." He was wrong.
Jake, what we've done, what the president has done, is make sure that we were able to adjust to anything happening on the ground. 20 years. It's simply not in the national interest.
You keep changing the subject to whether or not we should be there forever, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about whether or not this exit was done properly, taking out all the service members before those Americans and those Afghan translators could get out. That's what I'm talking about. And then you have to send people back in. That shows, that's a definition of, oh, we shouldn't have taken those troops out because now we have to send twice as many back in.
Look, I think it shows that we were prepared, the president was prepared for every contingency as this moved forward.
All right, so this interview is from August of 2021, which is basically 2 years ago now. And Jake Tapper's actually doing his job and asking hard questions. They're basically simple questions and, a normal question that any reporter would be asking, saying, hey, our president, our commander-in-chief, is saying something completely different than all of our intel operatives, than all of our military generals. Why and how is that happening? And how did the commander-in-chief make these decisions if the intel guys are saying something else? How did this happen? And Secretary Blinken just can't give him an answer. Yeah, well, we're going to get out of Afghanistan because we need to get out of Afghanistan. That's not what Jake Tapper's asking. Everybody wants to get out of Afghanistan. He's asking, how did you guys screw it up this bad? How did you guys not get people out before you decided to leave? It's like leaving the grocery store while your kids are still inside the store. You can't do that. And he's asking a simple question of why and how, and he can't get an answer.
Let me just ask you, is the Biden administration right now offering the Taliban anything in exchange for a promise of safe passage for Americans and others out of Afghanistan?
No, we haven't asked the Taliban for anything. We've told the Taliban that if they interfere with our personnel, with our operations, as we're proceeding with this drawdown, there will be a swift and decisive response. That's what we've told them.
How many Americans are left in Kabul, do you think, and how long will it take to get them out? Can you promise that all Americans will get out safely?
That is job number one. That is our number one mission, and that's what we're working on with a whole of government effort led by the State Department right now to get them out if that's what they want.
Why now? Why are you just doing that now? On this show, we've been talking for months about the need to evacuate these thousands of Afghan translators and others who helped U.S. service members during the war. President Biden just named an ambassador just a few days ago to run an interagency task force on this. Thousands of these folks are now trapped in their homes. They cannot even try to get to Kabul. It's not safe. I know 2 lieutenants, veterans, who are like setting up a GoFundMe to save their translators from cop Keating. Why did President Biden wait so long to set up the interagency task force?
In fact, that task force has been going for many, many weeks now.
Did he seriously just say weeks?
And Ambassador Jacobson, who is leading it, has actually been in place for many, many weeks.
Yep, that's what he said. He said weeks.
And we have been working this from day one.
People I know who are active in this, veterans, say that they only heard from the State Department within the last few days asking for their lists of people.
The embassy has had lists of people for a long time. We are doubling down, making sure that we know to the best of our ability everyone who may be at high risk and trying to find ways to account for them.
Everything except for the U.S. military. President Biden is intent on avoiding a Saigon moment. That's a reference, of course, to the hasty and humiliating U.S. evacuation from Vietnam. But with this troop surge to airlift Americans out of Afghanistan, aren't we already in the midst of a Saigon moment?
No, we're not.
All right, so this is kind of just a timeline of events. This is from August of 2021, and it was chaotic. It was a mess. We lost 13 service members. There were a ton of civilians that got killed. I think the number was actually close to 100 Afghan civilians got killed in the bombing. People were hanging off of airplanes while our military members were leaving, and people just had a ton of questions, and it was so embarrassing to try to get any answers from this administration. And now we're in 2023 and it's almost the same. We're going to go through a couple of these reports here, but what came next is they interviewed the top military officials in charge, and things got even blurrier. Things got even more confusing because once again, it contradicted everything that was coming from our commander-in-chief, Joe Biden.
The grilling on Capitol Hill today, America's top military leaders pressed on the chaotic and deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan and appearing to contradict President Biden when they revealed that their advice was to leave a small U.S. troop force in Afghanistan. President Biden telling George Stephanopoulos right here that no one said we should keep 2,500 troops. He said, "No one said that to me that I can recall." Tonight, we pressed the White House on that. It was a tense day on the Hill.
Good morning.
It was an extraordinary moment. For the first time, the president's top military advisors publicly acknowledging they did not support pulling all U.S. troops out of Afghanistan and implying they conveyed their concerns to the commander-in-chief.
My assessment was back in the fall of 20, and it remained consistent throughout, that we should keep a steady state of 2,500, and it could bounce up to 3,500, maybe something like that.
Did you ever present that assessment personally to President Biden?
I don't discuss exactly what my conversations are with the sitting president in the Oval Office, but I can tell you what my personal opinion was, and I'm always candid.
That contradicts what President Biden told George Stephanopoulos just over a month ago.
So no one told, your military advisors did not tell you, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops. It's been a stable situation for the last several years. We can do that. We can continue to do that.
No, no one said that to me that I can recall.
The head of U.S. Central Command, General McKenzie, going even further, saying he had given warning about what would happen if we didn't leave 2,500 troops behind.
And my view is that 2,500 was an appropriate number to remain, and that if we went below that number, in fact, we would probably witness a collapse of the Afghan government and the Afghan military. So,
General McKenzie, may I just, I guess my question is, would it be fair for the committee to assume that both President Trump and President Biden received that specific information?
I believe it would be reasonable for the committee to assume that.
But the Pentagon and the intelligence community also feeling the heat today. All the leaders testified they were surprised by the swift surrender of the Afghan forces. The Secretary of Defense admitting intelligence failures.
We didn't fully comprehend the depth of corruption and poor leadership in the senior ranks.
All right, so that went from August 2021 to August 2022, and we still didn't get any accountability. We got more contradictions. We have more questions without any answers. And this administration continues to hide from this. They will not accept any responsibility for President Biden's actions. They literally have the military officials saying, this wasn't our decision. And we have the guy that's making the decisions just hiding. So next, let's fast forward to 2023. And what happens? They release a summary of what happened. When do they release it? On a Friday, right before Easter. Another news dump. Then that's how slippery and slimy this administration continues to be. Also, we finally get a little bit of accountability, but I wonder who they're going to make accountable for this. Do you think it's them? Or could it be...
The White House today made public an internal review summarizing the 2021 U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The report included the bombing at Kabul Airport's Abbey Gate, which killed 13 U.S. service members. This report, which was long anticipated, repeatedly blamed the Trump administration for the chaotic withdrawal, noting that Mr. Trump agreed to a withdrawal date and started drawing down troops, but did not provide the Biden team with an actual withdrawal plan during the presidential transition.
I had no clue they were going to blame Donald Trump for the current president's actions. He was only in office for a year. He only planned the entire evacuation. He only planned the exact date they were going to withdraw. But yes, Donald Trump's fault.
Ed, I'm going to start with you because it's pretty clear what the main point was that they were trying to make here. It's in paragraph 2 of the unclassified summary that we received. It says, quote, President Biden's choices for how to execute the withdrawal were severely constrained by conditions created by his predecessor. In other words, as John Kirby put it, the previous administration tied our hands. So it took them almost 2 years to draw that conclusion. Did they take any responsibility or acknowledge any mistakes made by the Biden administration?
The word mistake appears once in this 12-page report, Nancy, noting that when, in essence, recounting that strike that occurred in central Kabul that was intended to kill an ISIS-K operative and ended up killing 10 civilians. They say, quote, to counter the perceived immediate threat, the U.S. military launched a drone strike in Kabul that mistakenly killed 10 civilians. But this is, they called it, or National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said they were going to do a hot wash, which is a fancy bureaucratic term for a deep dive into what went wrong. This 12-page document is a whitewash. There is, it is narrative, it is light on specifics, it's devoid of citations, and it is, in essence, their version of events as the classified reports conducted by the State Department and the Pentagon are being sent to lawmakers on the relevant committees for their full review. White House saying it will not release those classified reports to the general public, although inevitably details of those reports likely will ultimately somehow get out there in the public sphere. We'll wait and see how and when. So, John, thank you for doing this, but I think I speak on behalf of my colleagues in this room that we want the record to reflect that this was sent to us about 10 minutes before the briefing began, with little notice, and it's the very definition of a modern major holiday news dump. You're releasing this at the beginning of the high holidays and after months of requests from Republicans and the broader public. So why today? And is this all we get? And is this a response to the studies that were done by the agencies? Or is this considered a summary of it?
What you're seeing today is the result and the culmination of an awful lot of work, Ed. No effort here to try to obfuscate or try to bury something. It's an effort to try to be as open, as transparent as we can be. And what you got in that document there is a pretty fair summary.
Specific ones about what's in this document after a speed read here. On page 8, the President received and accepted the unanimous advice of his top national security officials to end the evacuation on August 31st. What is the definition of a top national security official? Because we know, for example, that General McKenzie, who was then head of CENTCOM, has said he objected to aspects of this. So what's the definition of a top national security official?
I am loath to get into the individual advice that individual members of the president's team give him. That would not be appropriate for me.
There's 4 pages here of blame on the previous administration, or this White House explanation of what the last White House did regarding Afghanistan. Nowhere in here does there appear to be any expression of accountability or mistake by either the president himself or others. Is there any for what happened?
I would argue that the very fact that we voluntarily, the agencies voluntarily decided to go conduct after-action reviews. Nobody told them to do that. That wasn't legislated by Congress. They did that on their own. And the fact that they did that, and that we were now placing it on the Hill for Congress to look at, the fact that we digested and distilled some of the key points of that and gave it out in a public document, the fact that I'm up here talking to you about it, I think shows you how seriously that the president felt about learning lessons from this withdrawal.
So the fact that it took them 2 years to release a summary of where they take zero accountability, they release nothing on how and why President Biden made the decisions that he made, except that they had 8 pages blaming the previous administration for why President Biden was so helpless, doesn't really give too much to the American people, and this was pretty much a joke. The United States media has been on President Biden's side since he has taken office. Here, they rebelled a little bit, and the press got a little frustrated. They knew that someone was peeing on them and telling them it was raining outside. They were frustrated. They were getting sick and tired of hearing the same lies that the rest of the American public were hearing. And they finally did their jobs.
And John, thank you for being here. It seems like page after page, this places the blame on the previous administration, starting with page 1. President Biden's choices for how to execute a withdrawal from Afghanistan were severely constrained by conditions created by his predecessor.
Yeah.
Let me just follow up with you on something that Ed was asking, which is, does the president take responsibility for the withdrawal and everything that happened thereafter?
He's the commander-in-chief, and he absolutely has responsibility for the operations that our men and women conduct and the orders that he gives, and he continues to believe that the order to withdraw from Afghanistan was the right one.
Things that could
But
have been-
wait, before I answer, but you need to remember, and I get the question about the previous administration. You got to look at when he came into office, what he was walking into. He didn't negotiate with the Taliban. He didn't invite the Taliban to Camp David. He didn't release 5,000 prisoners. He didn't reduce force levels in Afghanistan to 2,500. And he didn't have an arrangement with the Taliban that they weren't attack our troops. He came in with a certain set of circumstances. He had no ability to change. He had to deal with it based on what he inherited.
He had 8 months to plan, did he not?
He had to take 8 months to plan because whatever plans there might have been done by the previous administration, we didn't see.
What does the president believe? What mistakes does the president believe he made?
I'm not going to speak for the president on that score folding.
John, just finally, given the enormity of this report, given the American lives that were lost, why are we not hearing directly from the president?
We are putting this forth for you and for Congress today. And I think you've heard from the president. He has talked many times about his decision to withdraw from Afghanistan, his belief that it was the right decision. He has talked publicly about the withdrawal before.
All right, so once again, passing the buck, blaming other people, and this gets pretty disgusting here. The next line of questioning and the answer, I just find absolutely appalling, and I don't get disgusted very easily. His answer absolutely disgusts me.
John, who's going to get fired over this?
Peter, the purpose of the document that we're putting out today is to sort of collate the chief reviews and findings of the agencies that did after-action reviews. It's not the purpose of it is not accountability. It's the purpose of it is
Military leaders.
purpose
giving
of it
advice.
is
Doesn't
to
sound like
study
it was good.
lesson
You admit
learned.
that the intel was bad. So how can President Biden ever trust when they come into the Oval Office with the PDB that anything in there is legit?
What I said was
That intelligence is a mosaic. What if the mosaic, all the pieces are incorrect?
What I said was intelligence is hard business, and they get it right a lot too. There were some pieces here that weren't accurate, and we're being nothing but honest with you and the American people about what those inaccuracies were and how they shaped some of the decision making that was laid before the president and the questions that he asked. This document and this effort isn't about accountability today. It's about understanding.
But it doesn't seem like after the country has had a couple months to review this, and as the government has, people don't have an issue with the decision to order troops out of Afghanistan. It is with the way that this president ordered it done. There were children being killed. There were people hanging off of Air Force jets that were leaving, and you're saying that you guys are proud of the way that this mission was conducted?
Doesn't
Proud
mean
of that?
proud of the fact that we got more than 124,000 people safely out of Afghanistan? You bet. Proud of the fact that American troops were able to seize control of a defunct airport and get it operational in 48 hours? You bet. Proud of the fact that we now have about 100,000 Afghans, our former allies and partners, living in this country and working towards citizenship? You bet. Does that mean that everything went perfect in that evacuation? Of course not.
So after this administration's attempt to try to whitewash history of what actually happened on a Friday before Easter, now we get another report on a Friday before the weekend of 4th of July.
This just in, and it's notable. The State Department has released a report on its investigation into the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The findings are damning. It's a 28-point report here. Our Kylie Atwood has been going through it. And Kylie, a few things stand out to me, and I'm sure several stand out to you. One, from the very first point, insufficient senior level consideration of worst case scenarios. It notes that some officials questioned the decision making leading up to this. It notes that the handing over Bagram Air Base basically funneled everybody trying to leave the country to Hong Kong, to Hamid Karzai International Airport, listing throughout a number of failures in the preparation.
Yeah, it's a really damning report, Jim. There is, as you actually noted, that one finding that is at the top of these findings that I think really crystallizes what this report gets into. And it says, quote, that there were decisions beyond the scope of this review, but the team found that during both administrations, the Biden administration and the Trump administration, there was insufficient senior level consideration of worst case scenarios and how quickly those might follow. Now, what's clear as you read through this report is that there wasn't great organization or delineation of responsibility in this building at the State Department. One of the things that they point out is that there wasn't someone on the 7th floor here in the building dealing with crisis management for this. And the 7th floor is where the Secretary of State sits. There also wasn't a task force that was set up early enough to bring folks to the table to discuss what could be these crisis scenarios that they would face as they were preparing for the withdrawal. And when you had the Pentagon standing up that non-combatant evacuation operation, there wasn't a clear person at the State Department who was coordinating with that Pentagon effort, and so that created confusion as well, according to this report. So there's quite a few things that the department didn't do.
So what she basically just said here is there was nobody in charge. There was no list of people saying, hey, we need to get this group of people out. Hey, we need to get these people out. Hey, these people could get left behind. Let's get them out before we evacuate everybody. There was nobody on the 7th floor of the State Department running the show. It was chaos. It was basically Joe Biden said, I want to leave on this date right here, and pointed at a calendar, and then everyone just had to roll out. That was it. So this is a bombshell of a report, like it is. It's saying that, hey, nobody is accountable because nobody was in charge. There is no accountability. Nope. Joe Biden said, I want to leave here. We're out. We're leaving. Everybody's got to go. Nobody was running the show. There was no leadership. They had nobody step up and take charge. This is an awful administration. Like, this is the worst president you could ever have to do something like this. This man was not in charge of anything. He picked the date on the calendar, and then he went to bed or ate ice cream. I really don't know. But none of these people were actually planning and making sure everybody got out safe. Like, that never happened.
What does it say, if anything, Kylie, about the Abbey Gate attack? In the final days, of course, there were 13 U.S. service members, and let's not forget 170 Afghans who were there waiting, trying to escape H-Kaya, and they were killed in that terrorist attack at the airport.
That terrorist attack, as you said, killing 13 American service members and more than 150 Afghans, anything that this department could have done to prevent that from occurring. I think you'll hear folks in this building probably point the finger at the intelligence community or at the Department of Defense regarding decision-making surrounding that. But it does paint a picture of a very, very tenuous situation at the airport, which of course created the environment that allowed that ISIS attack to actually happen.
We also should note the timing of the release of this report is significant. It's a Friday afternoon before a long holiday weekend. Kylie, what are your sources in the State Department saying about the findings of this report?
Well, listen, this is something that I pressed State Department officials on when we had a call on this earlier today, because, you know, it's lost on no one that this report not only is rolled out on a Friday before a holiday weekend, but it's also being rolled out more than a year after the report itself was concluded. So they've, waited more than a year to roll out these findings. They're waiting until a Friday before 4th of July. What the senior State Department official said on that call is that they weren't going to get into process-related questions, but clearly folks in this building see that timing, and they're concerned about them trying to, really hide the fact that the department doesn't want all of its failures with this withdrawal really dragged through Washington and set up at a moment when Congress is in session. They might face more criticism.
We should also note that SIVs, special immigrant visas, have also been a key issue. And by the way, a continuing one, because there are many thousands of Afghans who served bravely along the side of U.S. forces who are still there. I've been in touch with some of them. It addresses that here. It says that there was a backlog prior, that they've made an effort to accelerate the process. But the fact is, here we are 2 years later, and there's still many people left behind.
Many.
Yeah.
It is still an ongoing issue. Kylie, I would thank you so much for walking us through the details of this scathing report.
All right, so that's even more of a bombshell, right? This report concluded a year ago. They had this information a full year ago, and they released it on a Friday before the 4th of July, on the same week that some of the biggest Supreme Court announcements in United States history were made. And they release it now. And it's on none of the media channels. I haven't seen it on any of the major media outlets. That CNN video was the only 2-minute clip I saw about this report. And this is so disgusting. I think it's shameful. It's Independence Day weekend. We lost these service members. We left a ton of people behind. And it almost makes you disgusted to call yourself an American and then associate with these people's actions. Like, it's that disgusting to me. Someone just needs to get up in front of the country and say, hey, I'm in charge, follow me, I'll be your leader, okay? I'll take responsibility. When things get hard, I'll make the right calls. If they go wrong, I'll take accountability for the mistakes. Just follow me and I'll lead the way. We need someone that will lead this country back to a point where people can be proud to call themselves Americans again. I feel like America's never been at a lower point than it is right now. We need something to bring us together. We need someone to bring us together. And we need someone to stand up and say, hey, I'm proud to be an American and I will lead this country. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please hit that like button, comment, let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. At the end of the video, I'm going to play a little montage with the service members that lost their lives during this withdrawal. Please stay tuned. I really appreciate you guys checking out the video.
The Afghans were never left with a choice. They believed us when we said that we would help rebuild their nation. We gave them hopes and dreams, and the rug has now been pulled from beneath their feet.
Marine Corps Sergeant Yohani Rosario, Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover, Marine Corps Corporal Hunter Lopez, Marine Corps Corporal Deegan William Taylor Page, Marine Corps Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Navy Corpsman Maxton Soviak, Marine Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Marine Corps Corporal Umberto Sanchez, Marine Lance Corporal Dylan Mirola, Marine Lance Corporal Kareem Nakoe, Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Noss, Marine Sergeant Nicole G. She was just 23 years old, featured in a Defense Department photo cradling an Afghan baby, posting on Instagram, "I love my job."
You guys are proud of the way that this mission was conducted?
Doesn't mean
of that?
proud of the fact that we got more than 124,000 people safely out of Afghanistan? You bet.